That's fine. Does it sound okay? Can you hear? Can you ask, can people online hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We're just waiting for a few people that are coming in. For those of you online that are wondering what's happening. Okay. Hi. We're going to go ahead and open circle. I'll say a phrase and you can say it after me. The sun is a circle.
The sun is a circle.
The moon is a circle.
The moon is a circle.
The earth is a circle.
The earth is a circle.
The drum is a circle.
The drum is a circle.
We are a circle within a circle.
We are a circle within a circle.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for everyone here at San Francisco Dharma Collective that makes it possible for us to meet together here in person and online. And I think you know my name is Isa Gucciardi. I'm a teacher and author, founder of the Foundation of the Sacred Stream, a school for consciousness studies in Berkeley, California. And one of my specialties is working at the intersection of Buddhism and Shamanism, which is why I'm teaching this class. And I've been a practicing Buddhist for many decades, a practicing shamanic practitioner for many decades. I've been a teacher of both for many decades. I am attaining many decades in my life, which I think is something to be grateful for. So, in this series, we're looking at the different aspects of Buddhist practice and shamanic practice, which are in common, like the commonalities. We'll also look at some differences at some point, but right now we're looking at commonalities. And last time we talked about initiation to some extent, but I'd like to focus on initiation as a commonality in each of these wisdom systems. So before we talk about the commonalities in each of the systems, I think I need to go ahead and again define the two systems, because there's a lot of people that weren't here last time, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands what we're talking about when we're talking about shamanic practice and Buddhist practice. So, of course, you are probably more familiar with Buddhist practice here. And of course, Buddhism is a philosophy, a science, a religion that was born in northern India, Nepal, in this incarnation in about 500 BC, with Gautama Buddha, who attained enlightenment and became enlightenment, meaning he understood the nature of reality after much seeking and much hardship and much insight. And then he spent the rest of his life teaching. And the teachings, of course, spread through India, and then they moved to Sri Lanka, and then to China, then to throughout Southeast Asia, and to the Himalaya, the higher Himalaya, Tibet, Bhutan, and Nepal, further north in Nepal. And so it's, and then of course, with time passing, it's spread throughout the world. And one of the interesting things about Buddhism is it tends to influence places where it goes and be influenced by the places that it goes. So, and it is primarily a philosophy or a knowledge-based system, a knowledge system, which says that everything is knowable, right? And that the things that we really need to know about are the things that we can, that will liberate us, where we can find a way out of our predicament as human beings. And I'll be talking more about that in just a minute. So you have, with Buddhism, you have it arising in one place and spreading as a phenomenon. With shamanism, you have something a little bit different. Shamanism is, the word shaman is a Mongolian word that means he or she who knows. And what the shamanic practitioner knows is the way in which the unseen world interacts with the seen world. And in particular, the unseen world is the unseen world behind the forms of nature. And in all shamanic traditions, you find this understanding that the earth is sort of the forms of the earth, the lakes, the trees, the rocks, are all sort of the tip of an iceberg of a much larger reality that can be understood and engaged with. And it is the shaman's task to do that, and to bring the knowledge that the earth offers into the affairs of humans. Now, unlike Buddhism, you have shamanism arising in almost every indigenous culture. So, and the really interesting thing about shamanic practices is that they are so similar. Cultures that have never had come into contact with each other, cultures that have been on the planet in different times and places, all have very similar, they're not all the practices are similar, but there is a core set of practices that are quite similar. And when you have this kind of commonality of practice, of course you have to think, well, what's the common denominator? And of course, the common denominator is the earth. And so this shamanism is an earth-based wisdom system. And so, unlike Buddhism, it's arising spontaneously. Thank you. Just leave it down. It's okay. It's arising spontaneously across the world, and you do have traditions being spread from one place to another, but shamanic traditions tend to be quite local because each tradition has its own set of pathways to the wisdom of the earth. Even though the practices are the same, or at their essence on the energetic level, they may have very different cultural practices that contain those pathways. And so they tend to be local. So even though the practices, when you look at them across, when you have the luxury of being able to be exposed to a lot of different shamanic cultures, you see the things that are similar. So, in applied shamanism, which is a form of shamanic practice that I've developed, we really focus on the healing practices that are similar. There's lots of other things that go on in shamanism that don't have to do with healing, but we don't look at those, and we won't be looking at those here. Or, I look at them in the very advanced classes that I teach, because you have to understand how to work with, certain practices that are not healing, and know how to counteract them in order to be able to create healing. So when we'd be talking about commonalities between Buddhism and shamanism, my main thing is one thing I didn't say is I developed a spiritual counseling process called depth hypnosis. That's depth with a P, depth hypnosis. And it is a combination of Buddhism, shamanism, energy medicine, hypnotherapy, and transpersonal psychology. So I'm primarily, I spend my days trying to help people heal and trying to train people. I don't try, hopefully I succeed in training people how to help other people heal. So that's, I have a little bit of a prejudice, and that's my lens. I'm looking at healing. And when I look at Buddhism, I also come with that same lens. What is it within Buddhist practice that is healing? And that is not always the thrust. I mean, of course, whenever you engage in Buddhist practice, you can't help but feel better. But there's a way of working with Buddhist practice that is in depth hypnosis that is very targeted toward really going to the heart of the matter and finding out where the suffering is arising and rooting it out with shamanic practices. Anyway, we could talk about that all night, but we're going to be talking about two aspects of Buddhist practice and shamanic practice that are similar. It's one set of practices, one thing that is common to both. Okay. Last week we talked about how they are both a psychology of wholeness, right? I don't know if some of you were here, and now we're going to be looking at another aspect that's similar between the two practices, which is the practice of initiation. Now, initiation is a word for most Westerners that you think about when you think about frat houses or something like that, right? But as a cultural anthropologist, I have my first academic degree was in cultural anthropology. I basically got to study shamanism academically. That was great. So initiation is a process wherein you move from one state of being into another state of being. So in a fraternity kind of initiation, you move from being a non-member of the fraternity and you go through hazing rituals and other rituals, and then you become a member of the fraternity. So that's the initiation. Is the old form is not being a member, and the new form is being a member. In shamanic practice, initiations are found whenever you have someone moving from one way of being into another way of being. And that's where you find all of the ceremonies. So you have a birth where someone has been a water being and is now an air being. And so you have these initiatory processes, these ceremonies that mark that movement of transition. In puberty, you have someone moving from a state of being where they cannot reproduce into a state where they can reproduce, right? Moving from childhood to adulthood. And that moment of initiation is marked by a ceremony in all shamanic cultures, because there's a tremendous amount of creative power that is released in a moment of initiation when you have the old form falling away and the new form being born. And in shamanic cultures, you have the culture wants that creative power that I think belongs to the individual. I won't go into my soapbox there, but I could be on a big soapbox there. So there's a tremendous amount of creative power released in initiation. And it's at that moment that we have to really pay attention and see what we are dedicating the power that's in that initiation to. In Buddhism, the big initiation is the movement from being engaged with the world from a samsaric point of view, where we don't examine our lives, we don't understand how we create our reality, we don't know how to take responsibility for creating our reality. We don't understand the force of karma and the thrust of karma. We don't understand how our attachments and our aversions and our misknowings are creating a reality that is not comfortable for us. And the initiation of refuge is to step out of that mindset by taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. This is a huge transformational moment. And the wonderful thing about Buddhism is that it doesn't I'm, maybe some schools, try to, well, uh, there's some schools that are quite deliberate. If you're going to take refuge, you have to take refuge here, and you can't go anywhere else. There's that thing. Buddhism really does resist. There is a way to resist that collectivization and demand that you dedicate your life energy to the collective rather than to yourself, because there's so much emphasis on individual practice, right? So that movement of coming from a place of unknowing into a place of refuge is the initiation, the big major initiation in Buddhism. And I'm going to talk more about that process in a minute. And in shamanic practice, there are several kinds of initiations that call a practitioner to the path. And I mentioned some of them last week. It can be like a calamity or an illness, or a vision that strikes one, a strong dreams that come to one, or you can actually ask for an initiation by engaging in a vision quest. And we're going to talk about the vision quest and the process of visioning in shamanic practice as the moment of initiation. And the old form that falls away is a way of being where one is not aware of the unseen world behind all the forms of nature, and stepping into a place where you are aware of that unseen power. And the vision quest, or the spontaneous visionary moment, is that, and is one of the many types of initiations that you have in shamanic practice. So I'm going to talk about the process of taking refuge in the Buddhist understandings, and I'm going to talk about the process of the vision quest. Both are stepping into greater forms of knowledge, greater forms of awareness, major ways of knowing that are new, right? So the initiations in this case that we're talking about is an initiation in many ways of the mind and of the heart, in terms of a shift in the way that we place our mind and our heart. So let's talk a little bit about Buddhism first. It's one that's going to be most familiar to you. So again, when we're talking about samsara, we're talking about a world of experience where you really don't understand how you're creating your own reality. And when you come across something like the Four Noble Truths, and you're realizing, okay, I'm creating my pain by the things that I'm attached to, the things that I'm avoiding, and the things that I have a misunderstanding about, that begins to dawn on you. And then you begin to understand a little bit about the nature of karma and the way in which each action has a consequence, and how every thought that you think has a consequence, every action that you take has a consequence. And you begin to understand how you're caught in a cycle of consequences and actions that if they are not informed by some effort toward compassion, toward self and other understanding, toward the desire to free oneself from the cyclic experience of karma, then one stays in samsara. So as a person is beginning to enter into the awareness of what Buddhism has to offer, these big issues about how I'm creating my reality, the nature of my karmic patterns, how I have created them, and how I can see them going forward in my life if I don't change the way that I'm creating my reality. All of that begins to dawn in a pretty big way for someone coming into contact with some of the basics of Buddhist philosophy. And refuge as an initiation sounds like a really good idea, right? I think it's a really good idea, because in taking refuge, you're taking refuge in the three jewels, of course. You're taking refuge in the Buddha, the teacher. You're taking refuge in the Dharma, the teachings. And you're taking refuge in the sangha, the group of like-minded beings. And so this process of refuge is a stepping away from an old way of being and stepping into a new way of being that is characterized at the beginning of the path by the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path, developing right view, developing right concentration, developing right meditation, developing right speech, developing right action, developing right livelihood. There's a path laid before you, a very clear path that's laid before you that helps you step away from old ways of knowing and being. And so as you enter into this initiation of refuge, you have this path to follow that will help you continue to transform and to continue to change and become something other than what you once were, right? So that's pretty great, right? So I'd like to focus tonight on our meditation for Buddhism. Does anyone have any questions about looking at Buddhism in this way and taking refuge in this way? Anybody have any questions or thoughts?
This microphone is not to amplify us, but so our friends online can hear. So when you talk about taking refuge, you don't mean just like the formal refuge ceremonies that some traditions offer, right? You mean like even including the personal, I mean, because I just do it every day. Feels like I need to do it every day. But is that included, or do you mean like the really formal sort of like?
Thank you for asking
Yeah.
that. Yes, you can have a formal ceremony, initiation ceremony, which is the refuge ceremony, absolutely. Yeah.
But I'm saying in Buddhism, when you're talking about it right now as initiation, do you mean only the formal ceremony or also just the individual?
Both.
Okay, cool.
Both, yeah.
I'm happy to hear
Thank you
that.
for
Yeah.
including that, right.
Anybody else?
Cool.
I have a question when you were talking more at the beginning about how Buddhism arose and spread and how shamanism arose and didn't so much spread, but that it's local, and that shamanic traditions around the world have so many similarities. And you said the common denominator is the earth. And I thought you were going to say the common denominator is the human mind. They're both the common denominator, or are you, from your perspective, the human mind is
From a
not?
shamanic point of view, the common denominator is the earth.
Is the earth?
This, from a Buddhist point of view, it's the mind.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
That shows you my,
Yeah,
My
right,
bent,
right.
right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big differences between Buddhism and shamanism is Buddhism is very mind-oriented and shamanism is not. It's shamanism is very body-oriented in some ways, and Buddhism is very mind-oriented.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked them.
Yeah,
I'll let it just wash over me.
yeah. I think, who had the question?
I like your interpretation on Buddha as teaching, Dharma as, no, Buddha as teacher, Dharma as teaching, and Sangha as a group of like-minded people. I have a question on, in Tibetan tradition, when we take refuge in Root Lama, how do we understand?
When you take refuge in the root lama, the root lama is the doorway to the Buddha. Right, so the lama is sort of like the front end of the Buddha, right? It's the accessible aspect of the Buddha. Yeah. Any other questions online or anything? No. Okay. So, so one thing that I'd like to focus on when talking about taking refuge is to focus on taking refuge in the Buddha, taking refuge in the Dharma, yes, but I'd like to focus on taking refuge in the Sangha. And in particular, I'd like to talk about an aspect of the Sangha that is not always emphasized in Buddhist practice. And that is the aspect of the inner Sangha. And this is where you do see a little influence of Buddhism, of shamanism in the way that I look at Buddhism. And you also see why, I mean, I spent many years sitting in a zendo looking at the wall and like a good Buddhist getting nowhere. It did not help me. But when I kind of spent, I mean, it did help me. I mean, I did, stop some of my most flagrant idiocies, but Tibetan Buddhism really is the place where I have found my home because there is that strong influence of shamanic practice. And you do have, within shamanic practice, you have this concept of the helping spirits. These are aspects these are condensations of natural powers that take the form of nature, that are encountered in the altered state of awareness that is generated by a repetitive drum through the shamanic journey, or through a vision quest that we're getting ready to look at, or through a plant medicine, some sort of plant medicine. And so you have, as a shamanic practitioner, you generally have quite a few guides or helping spirits that you are working with, and who are actually doing the work that it looks like you are doing, that you're actually following them, you're embodying them, you are channeling them essentially in doing things like doing a power retrieval for someone who doesn't have enough power, or doing a soul retrieval for someone who has been fragmented by trauma, or by doing an energetic interference release by someone who's been inhabited by someone else's energy, right? So this concept of working with inner guides is very common in Buddhism, shamanism, sorry, but it's also within Tibetan practice. You have, because of the Bön influence in the Himalayas, you have all of these types of Buddhas. You have the green Tara, you have the white Tara, you have the medicine Buddha, you have Chenrezig, I should mention, the white Tara, the Buddha of longevity, the green Tara, the Buddha of action and compassion and action, the medicine Buddha, the Buddha of healing. You have Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of infinite compassion, right? Like, so with multitudinal ways of being able to focus that compassion. And then you have all the Dharma protectors. You have Yamantaka, who has able to kind of harness any kind of negativity that is arising within the person who is practicing, or within the community, to protect the Dharma. And then you have Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, who helps clarify the mind. So you have all of these very helpful beings that are articulated and are encountered and have their own initiations that you are offered through a lama who has been initiated into each of these wisdom fields that each of these Buddhas represent, right? This for a shamanic practitioner, this is so natural, like to have all of these wise beings who are here offering assistance, right? So, but in terms of external Buddhist practice. A lot of these, there's, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I remember one teaching I was at, he said, I always tell everybody there's going to be an empowerment, so they come. So there's this thing of sort of chasing empowerments, of course it's wonderful to receive the power of these wise beings through the vehicle of the Lama. But that tends to be sort of, not the end of it, but, of course you may have mantras that you practice, devotions that you do, but working actively with these different deities, it's something that is not done as actively as it is in shamanism, where you're working actively to work with the helping spirits that are there offering you assistance, and whom you have encountered and whom you have established relationships with through the journey, or through plant medicine, or through their visionary process. So I'd like to focus on the inner sangha for Buddhism. And so because it's a little bit of a different view. So I'd like to go ahead and do a meditation that is drawn from Robert Thurman's book, The Jewel Tree. I don't know if you know Robert Thurman. He's a wonderful Buddhist scholar. I teach with him. And I just love his book. I mean, I love all of his books, but The Jewel Tree is just this sort of inspirational, wonderful vision that he is bringing forward, kind of based on this idea of, well, I'm going to do the meditation and you'll see what it is. So I'm going to listen. As Bob would say, get in meditation mode. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask? It's fine if you want to ask it before.
I'd rather wait.
Okay, no problem. And Bob also goes, ding. I won't do that. I won't do that.
To start?
Yeah, he goes, get in meditation mode, ding. And then at the end he goes, ding. He's so fun. He's really funny. Okay. All right, so let's just letting yourself get settled. Noticing all the places where the surface under you meets the different parts of your body. And as you do, just noticing where your breath is. Noticing as you breathe in where your breath goes, and noticing as you breathe out where your breath goes. And just becoming aware of the way in which your breath is like a bridge between your outer world and your inner world. And with each breath, just coming more and more deeply into your inner world. And just resting in your breath here in your inner world. Watching your breath. Moving in and moving out. And as you're here in your inner world, just becoming aware of everything that you've ever known or felt or sensed or dreamed or imagined. Just feeling the fullness of your inner world as you allow your inner senses to open widely. Your inner sense of taste, touch, and smell. Your inner sense of sight and hearing. But especially that sixth sense of just knowing. Allowing them all to open quite widely. And just allowing yourself as you focus here in your inner world to focus on a place in nature where you have been, where you have felt comfortable. And here in this place in nature, I'm wondering if you can sense or feel or imagine a tree here somewhere in this place where you are in nature. Just allowing yourself to focus on this tree. What is the nature of this tree? Just allowing yourself to take note of how the light filters through the leaves or the needles of the tree. Noticing if the tree has any flowers that have any particular scent. Noticing the roots of the tree. And just feeling your connection with this tree. And you may begin to notice the way in which this tree is actually quite marvelous. And perhaps allowing yourself to even imagine that the leaves and the flowers of this tree are almost like jewels glistening in the light. And just allowing yourself to begin to sense or feel the magic of this tree. And allow yourself to call to this tree, to sit on the branches of this tree. All of your mentors, all of your teachers, all of your guides who are compassionate in nature and who wish you well and have wished you well on your path. Just calling any guide, any teacher, any mentor, any counselor, any teacher of any subject who has helped you on your path. And if you've ever been part of a spiritual system that has angels or prophets that have resonated with you, calling them to this tree as well. And just allow yourself to become aware of your connection with each one of them, feeling them smiling at you, wishing you well, encouraging you. Just recognize that you have this jewel tree here within you, filled with all of these compassionate beings who have only your highest good as their sole intent. And just allowing yourself to step into a sense of refuge with them, taking refuge in this jewel tree, in all of the beauty of this field of well-wishing. And encouragement and support. And just allowing yourself to know that this place is always here within you. Just taking that in as you recognize that you have this place of your inner sangha to support you and guide you. And taking refuge in that. And then when you're ready, just coming back to your breath, focusing back on your breath, knowing you can return to this tree at any time. But for now, coming back to your breath. And just watching it move in and move out. And with each breath, just following your exhale a bit further into the room. And when you're ready, just stretching a bit, opening your eyes, and just reflecting on your meditation for a moment. We won't have any talking during that time as you do that reflection. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share about that experience? So you have this inner sangha here for you that you can take refuge in when things seem a little tough. So, which things are pretty tough these days for a lot of people. So, okay. So, did you have that question?
And I didn't want to take us down a rabbit hole because this might be a little off topic. But when you mentioned Bon, it reminded me that I've had this kind of a long-standing question, and I've asked it of a couple of teachers, and everybody was like, but was there something about Bon that made it particularly receptive to non-dualism? And now I'm beginning to suspect that it was the shamanic aspect of Bon.
Well, non-dualism in shamanic practice is really about being one with the earth. That's the way that that's expressed. So, and there, Buddhism and the Bon tradition in Buddhism have not always been happy partners. There have been, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche he's actually a friend, a friend of the sacred stream, and we've done a lot of collaborations together. And he talks about, Mace, I forgot to get my water. Would you give me some water? Cold or warm? Regular. And he talks a lot about how there was even now still today some prejudice against Bon practitioners from Buddhist camps, seeing it sort of as a lesser practice. And His Holiness has been very, very deliberate in including Bon as the fifth school, major school, and really trying to do something about that prejudice. But Tenzin Wangyal, of course, being one of the preeminent Bon teachers in the West right now. The mixing of Buddhism and shamanism, I think, in the Himalayas occurred because of that amalgamation of adapting by the Bon tradition of the Buddhist principles and adapting by Buddhism of some of the Bon practices, such as having this multiple distillations of universal power in the form of these different types of beings that became adapted as different types of Buddhas, right? So I don't know if I really answered your question. I've been trying to address the issue of that encounter between Bon and Buddhism, which is not at all straightforward.
I think that my understanding of this, it's complex, it's nuanced, and my understanding is going to be a journey, but you have just definitely facilitated me on that path.
Okay, great. Any other questions or thoughts from the meditation? Yes.
One thing that that beautiful nature refuge, for me, it's very tied up with particular redwood trees and groves where there's, a tremendous amount of kind of pliability. I mean, redwood bark and so moist, and the water element around that seems to collect around redwood trees is really just so life-giving and gentle and nurturing. And I realize that when I'm doing Buddhist meditation, it's often sort of clear landscape. It's often mindscapes. It doesn't have that kind of complexity and fecundity that sort of is really readily apparent in the sort of a nature refuge for me. And I'm wondering, and I don't even know if that's a question or something, but it sort of seems like there's something about the the denseness and darkness of earth versus the clarity and brightness of sky. And I'm just, so as I'm, yeah, so it's not really, I guess it's an observation and a sort of a question about like, well, do these things kind of, are they sort of different aspects of something, or or is it just differences, or is it just that kind of my understanding is that at a level where I'm just sort of being affected and pulled into a sort of a premature conclusion by a sort of a surface appearance of things. Is that
Well,
sense?
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's, there's a lot of different access points to higher consciousness, right? And from, within Buddhist practice, there's a lot of Buddhist practices that, don't really afford for any kind of internal vision. The idea is to get beyond form and to get into the clear light and to get, to try to get into that non-dual place. But because I do so much work with hypnotherapy and, with shamanic practice, I tend to bring that into my Buddhist teachings as well, because I think that, I totally understand the idea that you don't want to have too much going on that's distracting the mind away from that one-pointed stillness of the clear light. I totally get that. And I think that's a really, I think, developing, a Dzogchen practice, where you're really, really trying to just see the clear light at the heart of all the forms around, at the same time. I really like that practice because it gives a place for both, that, there are the forms that of the world, and then there is the clear light at the heart of them, right? I really love that, because, and developing a practice where you can be aware of both at once, I think is very deepening, rather than, and of course, I do think, I've spent, a lot of time looking, chasing light, trying to still focus my mind in that still point. And I think that's a really valid practice too. But I think there's a lot of paths up the mountain, and I think that it's important to embrace them all. And I really think, Buddha is the first one to say, they said he gave 84,000 different types of teachings, right? Because there's 84,000 types of people, like everyone's in a different place in their practice and different, a lot of Americans, Westerners, that the thing I noticed, that they can't sit still for 5 minutes, with just sitting with the light. They really can't do it. So having a guided meditation that has a form that brings them into another way of knowing their inner world, and just allowing themselves to experience something a little bit different with the help of someone like this is the influence of hypnotherapy, where you're helping a person step into another way of being with the hypnotic suggestion, that sort of thing, is really helpful. And I think shamanism as a practice is really helpful for Westerners too, because there's such a psychology. The thing about Buddha, we're going way afield here, but this is the difference between Buddhism and shamanism. Buddhism was originally practiced in highly collectivized cultures, where there's a lot of connectivity, and a lot of social structures. And so the idea of pulling out of those social structures into an internal place of away from that kind of collective is really truly a contrast and something very instructive for the person who is seeking spiritual understanding. In the West, everyone is so psychologically isolated already. And I think this, I know myself as a practitioner, spent all those years looking at that wall, you know, thinking, I'm gonna find it, I'm gonna get it. But I was just really lonely when I think about it. I was very alone, and I mean, looking at that wall, I never saw any light come out of that wall, you know? So I mean, I worked really hard. You know? And I think that it's the shamanic practice of having a guide or having a companion on the path that is compassionate in nature and that helps, and that you can kind of interact with internally, helps you begin to be able to work with your inner world in a particular way and begin to step into being able to tolerate being in that stillness and not feeling the isolation, right?
Wow, what a generous answer. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
sure. I mean, that's why I went for the inner sangha, right? Because I trying to counteract that into that psychological isolation that most Westerners do feel. Yeah. So, okay. Thank you for the question. Yeah. All right. Yes. Yeah.
Also, question and reflection. It reminded me of doing refuge tree meditation. And I guess when I visualize refuge tree, of course, there's like way more details, like protectors, bodhisattvas, Buddhas, like deities, controls, and this inner sanctuary or inner sangha is, there's some similarity. Are they both try to invoke
Yeah.
the sanctuary?
Yeah, they're both, the jewel tree meditation is drawn from that tradition, the refuge tree tradition.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you haven't read Bob's book on the jewel tree, I recommend it. It's very inspiring. I also recommend his book on infinite life. We really need to read that book now with everything happening. Read that book now. Infinite life. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move to shamanism now and talk about the initiation where you're stepping away from, so here we're stepping away from samsara into the refuge, and the initiatory process is, the initiatory moment is moving out of a place of unconsciousness into a place of greater consciousness. That same initiatory moment in shamanism, as I mentioned, can take a lot of different pathways. We're going to focus primarily on the vision quest tonight. Now, one of, again, the vision quest or a spontaneous vision or a strong dream or a calamity or an accident, these are all calls to the path. And in the process of trying to understand these anomalous experiences, people learn to understand themselves and learn to step into a new relationship with the knowledge that has been presented to them through these experiences. And if they are working shamanically, they are doing this with the help of guides and ideally a group of older shamans that are helping them. But people are having these kinds of experiences all the time now, and there's no shamanic net to catch them, you know? And so this is one of the reasons I teach applied shamanism, trying to create more awareness of the potentials for a visionary experience, or the potentials for strong dreaming, or the ways in which these are pathways into greater knowing and greater understanding that tend to get a little bit pathologized. And people often have that experience, and I'll talk more about that, of you know, like they think there's something wrong with them. They don't see things the way everybody else sees them. And, you know, sometimes they're told that they need medication, so they stop seeing, that sort of thing. You know, like there's so much that can be said for understanding the visionary experience. And now with the advent of so much plant medicine being done in poorly held circles, poorly curated experiences where people are having really strong visions, like very strong experiences of internal visionary experience that they can't understand or they can't quite integrate into their everyday life. And so then they have this kind of split experience and don't really know what to do with themselves, right? So there's this whole way of understanding visionary experience that we could talk about all night, but I'm going to focus on the vision quest, because the vision quest is a very definite initiation. In many traditional shamanic traditions, a vision quest is often taken as a person is moving into puberty. And the idea is to be able to ask for a vision of a guide, a helping spirit, or a vision of a particular set of experiences that are going to lead that person as they go forward in their lives. And you know, one of the best known visions is that of Black Elk, you know, who was a Lakota medicine man who was recognized as a medicine man because of his visionary experience. And he had a series of strong visions when he was a young person. He was like, I think he started having visions at age 9. And I just have a very brief, there's a wonderful book called Black Elk Speaks. It has a lot of controversy around it, but I love that book. I think, and I really respect him and his life. You know, he was trying to lead his people as his people were being destroyed. It was at the end of the 1800s, early coming into the 1900s, and he watched and curated his people through the last of the demise of his people. And his visions and that he had when he was young really sustained him and helped him be a strong leader through that time. And so here I'm just going to read a little bit here. It said, at the age of 9, Black Elk experienced a profound vision that would shape his life and his understanding of the world. In his vision, Black Elk saw a sacred hoop representing the unity of his people and the interconnectedness of all things. The nation's hoop, a sacred image central to Black Elk's vision, symbolizes the former unity of the Lakota people. The blooming tree in the center of the vision represents the source of life and sustenance for all beings. Black Elk's vision emphasized the interconnectedness of humanity and the earth, a concept central to his spiritual teachings. And he actually got, I think he must have had some kind of fever because he was unable to walk. And he was, you know, sort of in and out of consciousness for several days as he was having these series of visions. And that's not an unusual initiation for to the shamanic path. And but he also did vision quests. And a vision quest is something where you are actually calling the vision rather than having the vision call you, right? And so in a vision quest, you know, what, and this is common to many traditions, there might be different particular ceremonies that are done, or different particular preparatory processes or integration processes. But in a vision quest, you essentially go into nature with very little food or water or shelter, and you find like maybe a 4x4 area, and you sit there for as long as you have decided to sit there. Now, don't do this at home. No, you really do need to have a guide to do a vision quest, and people do have, in most traditions, they have a guide who helps them, perhaps carve a pipe, weave a tapestry, do tobacco offerings, different processes to help them prepare for going into this place in nature where they're going to request a vision. And today when people do vision quests, there's the guide is there bringing water to them every once in a while, making sure they're okay. There's a way to do this safely. So I don't recommend going and sitting out overnight somewhere without someone knowing what you're doing. I just want to say that. But usually you choose a place like 4x4. You could have maybe a blanket, and maybe some water, and then you begin to pray and to request that a helping spirit come to offer you a teaching and to offer you insight and to show you your path. And a significant feature of vision quests is the way in which the unseen powers of nature are able to make themselves known through the actual forms of nature as the quester's senses shift. This shift in awareness occurs because the usual daily distractions, electronics, the lack of regular meals change how a person perceives the world around them. And a quester may have encounters with animals or plants or ordinary reality that illuminate an internal awareness, or an internal state may be focused on the quester's inner mental or emotional processes in a particular way. I know that I had one student, and he did a vision quest with in New Mexico, and he chose his place, and he was being guided. There's a really wonderful guy there that helps people with vision quests. And he had chosen a place, he sat down on it, and once you've chosen your place, you can't move, right? Like, that's the deal. And he realized that he had set his blanket down on top of a layer of rattlesnakes, like that they were in the rocks below him. And he spent the whole time in terror, and for him, that was a really major initiation for him into understanding the nature of his fear. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. Something in the external world is triggering something in the internal world. And vision quests can be difficult. A lack of food and shelter and sometimes water can make a person feel deprived. And if they're having difficulty perceiving the presence of guidance, or if they are receiving guidance regarding difficult personal matters, it can be challenging for people to stay with the process. And people often experience a dissolution of their usual ways of knowing themselves. And this is part of the initiation. The old way of knowing yourself falls away, and a new way of understanding yourself and the powers of the unseen world begins to dawn. After the vision quest, the initiate sits with the person who supervised the quest, and sometimes with other people who may have been part of that cohort of questers. And if other people have also been seeking a vision at the same time, they may join in the circle afterwards as well. And an effort is made to help the initiate understand their experience, and assistance is offered in interpreting what has happened. It's very important to sit with the learnings of the quest in order to be able to integrate the power of the events into ordinary life. And, people do encounter, guides in a wolf may come to them in non-ordinary reality, or a bear may come to them in non-ordinary reality, or a hummingbird may come to them in ordinary reality. But they begin to interact with these fields of being and begin to learn more about themselves and the world. I'll tell you a little bit about I'll tell you a little bit one of my vision quests. The first time I did a vision quest, I stationed myself a bit too close to a favorite hangout of mosquitoes. And it was really hot during the day and cold at night. And I became very grumpy very quickly, and I was unable to focus on the ceremony or the prayers that I had been given in preparation. And I found myself actually refusing to say the prayers, and I was shocked. I was shocked at myself. But my prayers had always been such an important part of my spiritual life. And as the quest continued, I found myself obsessed with figuring out how I could get out of staying in nature for the full 3 days. I was like, it's the same thing I did when I first did my first 10-day sit. All I wanted to do, the first 3 days, all I tried to do is figure out how I could get out of there, So I imagined one scenario after another that could justify my leaving the quest early. But I barely noticed the natural world around me. So this was really. Luckily, I had a dream as I dozed during the heat of the day that helped me perceive my misery from a different perspective. A white wolf came to me and showed me how I was resisting everything around me: the mosquitoes, the prayers, the hunger, the quest itself. And then white wolf showed me that I was also always in some state of resistance to my environment, vision quest or not. Again, I was shocked. I had not realized how willful I was. And I spent the next few days praying for insight about how to step out of my resistance. White wolf stayed close by, and I felt supported in my effort to climb out of the dark place I had discovered within myself. I received so much guidance and information about acceptance and flow from the natural processes around me and from white wolf. Every butterfly, every gust of wind showed me non-resistance. My willfulness began to dissolve a bit as I surrendered to my hunger, to the mosquitoes, to the cold, and to the heat. And by the morning of the third day, I did not have the energy to resist anything. I felt like a puddle, weak and moving in no particular direction. This was a new way of experiencing myself, and through it all, white wolf remained a steady presence as everything I knew about myself dissolved. This is a typical kind of experience that you have in a vision quest, where you have this dissolution of your way of knowing yourself and some kind of dawn of understanding of some transcendental knowledge. Over the next few months, I brought the insights from the vision quest into my everyday life, and I continued to be amazed at how much resistance I had, even to small things. And I worked to dissolve it and to develop greater patience and tolerance. The work from that first vision quest is still something I focus on regularly in my spiritual practice. And I met a new guide in that vision quest, and I met myself in a new way. So, I just wanted to offer you my own experience there, just to kind of give you, maybe a little TMI, because I'm such a realized being and I have no resistance. But yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? So this vision, this surrendering and asking for assistance is the essential aspect of a vision quest. There's also, I want to talk a little bit more about spontaneous visions that are also part of the initiatory path in shamanic practice. I recently taught a class on the shamanic journey. It's a class that I teach very regularly. And there were about a third of the students in that class that had spontaneous visions. It was so interesting that, there were all these people that had these spontaneous visions. And most of them had said that they were reluctant to speak about their experience. They weren't used to speaking about it because, people thought, that when they did, they became disorganized and trying to articulate it. That was one of the things that some of them said, and that people thought that, well, maybe they weren't quite all there. And as each person spoke, I realized that their disorganization was not a function of some psychological disorder. It appeared to be the result of the internal conflict that came from having experiences that seemed to be valid to them, but were dismissed or rejected by others, right? That is the place where they were really caught, and I think this is a place where a lot of people get caught. And some had been trying to pretend that they were not experiencing what they were experiencing because they were afraid they might be considered crazy. This made it hard for them to articulate their encounters as they began to speak about them. However, when they were able to lay out their experience completely and ask questions of their guides whom they encountered through the shamanic journey about them, they became more organized. And it was quite possible that almost all of these students would have been recognized as shamanic initiates had they had been living in a culture which recognized the value of being able to connect to the spirit world, right? I always lose page 3. Sorry. Okay. All right, anyway. There it is. So I have to say that I was really grateful that they had found their way to the class so I could help them shift their relationship to the initiatory path, and so that they could organize themselves in such a way as to be able to pursue their lives and be able to take refuge in the guidance that they were receiving through their visionary process. As they understood their experience from a more neutral place, without judgment or fear, they became stronger and more empowered. They were able to access the learning that they had developed over lifetimes of working in social contexts where the concepts of visionary experience and the worlds and the separation between the ordinary and non-ordinary reality were not bridged by visionary experience. And as they were able to recognize their capacities and how they could be used to help themselves and others, many of them determined to develop their gifts more fully so they could be of service to the community in much the same way that shamans have been in traditional settings for millennia. And I have to say, that kind of experience for me as a teacher is such a gift. It's like, I love being able to help people understand themselves in new ways and be able to understand that they can access inner guidance and that they can become more organized when they are given these kinds of visions or these kinds of, often, people also have really big dreams. And I've helped a lot of people who have the visions that come in dreams that are prescient. Like, I've had a lot of people come into my practice where they see things in their dreams before they happen, and they come in and they'll say that the reason that they're coming in is for insomnia. And it actually is for insomnia because they won't let themselves go to sleep because they're so terrified that they're going to dream something that comes true. And it's really not unusual that people think when they have those kinds of visions and dreams, they think and if it's an unpleasant thing that occurs or that they've dreamt about, they'll often think that they caused that by their dreaming, and they are absolutely tortured, and it's wonderful to be able to help people, help them understand. I mean, there's a whole way to understand precognition that I help people step into. To help them kind of settle so that they can access and begin to organize their gifts and be able to step into a more empowered way of being, which is, of course, what the whole point of both of these initiations is, right? Stepping into refuge to feel more empowered, more enlightened, stepping into the initiations of allowing for the possibility of this transcendent knowledge to take its root in you and to guide you in your life and step into a greater way of knowing and being, right? So initiation is the theme of this evening's talk. And we've looked at the way in which initiation happens in Buddhism, the way in which it happens in shamanism, just one of the initiations that is a call to the path, or two. Well, actually we did three, because we also did a little dreams, right? Visionary experience that happens spontaneously, vision quest where the vision is requested, and visions that occur in dreams. And next class, we're going to talk a lot more about dreaming and in both traditions. And because in both traditions, dreaming is a really big thing. So, we will continue there. But does anyone have any questions about what we've just covered in the shamanism part of the initiation?
I have a question. So, I took your the shamanic journey, and it was definitely life-changing. Because I actually journey every day now, and I didn't know that I had the support and the guidance that I could access. So would you consider that as an initiation?
Absolutely. In the shamanic journey, when you meet a guide, you're entering into a path of initiation with the guide, and the guide is going to help develop you, as you've seen.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
thank you. I highly recommend if you guys are really interested. It was amazing, and what she did for me was I couldn't see a guide, I couldn't experience it, and so we would all come up and people that didn't see it, and because I was always very independent and I never thought I needed any help, but what she did was a power retrieval, and I felt it, and I've always felt it, and I always thought, oh, I don't know what this is, this insight that I didn't accept it because I didn't think I deserved it, or why would I even have it? But it was always inside of me. So, yeah, if you guys are interested for a life-changing experience.
I'm so glad that that happened for you. Absolutely. Any other questions or thoughts before we end? Yes.
Do we have time?
Yeah, we have 5 minutes.
I just was
officially.
sort of thinking that, like, in Buddhism, tell me what you think. Like, you were talking about your first 10-day retreat, right? As sort of like an inner version of the outer vision quest,
Yeah,
right? Because,
Yeah.
like, theoretically,
yeah, I
I
ran
mean,
into the same issues, yeah, resistance.
but also like you're not, yeah, me too. But there's also like way fewer inputs,
Yeah. no,
right? So
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a way in which you're sort of laying a similar table just with different ingredients.
Exactly,
Yeah?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Although in shamanic traditions, the idea of the evolution of the self and, moving toward like a greater state of enlightenment is not really that's not really on the table, That what is on the table is moving into a greater oneness with the earth, which
It's the same
is
thing.
the same thing, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I get
it's
that.
the mind and
Uh-huh.
the earth, they're different paths of knowing. They're equally valid.
I mean, it's interesting because, again, the mind and the earth differentiation between Buddhism and shamanism, but every time there's like that comment this evening, I just keep thinking about how Buddha was touching the earth
Yes,
as the source of refuge and
Yeah.
was in his final moments of seeing clearly, seeing through.
right,
And so I think that, in my mind,
yeah,
then kind of anchors Buddhism in the earth.
absolutely.
Yeah, earth tradition. Maybe you spoke about that last time too.
The
Right.
visions of Mara, that when Mara was, when in his mom, under the Bodhi tree, and Mara kept sending him these visions of, lusty women and, terrifying warriors. And Buddha said, you cannot overcome me. You cannot, because my power is the power of the earth. And he pointed to the earth at that moment, right? So that was the initiatory, like in his initiation, there was the earth right there,
Yeah.
right?
And the tree.
And the tree, there it is,
Well, he kind of did what you were describing, right? The
right?
Buddha did a vision quest
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a way, right?
Yeah, right, that's right. That is a very good point.
Yeah. He sat
And
under a
it was
tree
fun-
for a long time.
Yeah, and, there's speculation that he may have been doing some plant medicine doing that, so,
Determination not to move from that spot.
With determination not to move from that spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Until he saw what he needed to see, yeah.
it's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that around. Yeah, right.
Do you think, I mean, this whole thing about,
Wait, our friends online have to hear.
this whole thing about the appearance of, you're talking about him having this Mara throwing up all of these appearances of, lusty women and warriors and things like that. And it's sort of like the whole notion of like maybe there's a sort of a spirit world that's sending you messages, but because by speaking to myself, it's like I'm in such a limited state of understanding that I'm going to misinterpret so maybe if I was visited by a wolf, I would be terrified by it or run from it or something rather than, and so it's almost like that the visions, I'm wondering, is it sort of like the vision that Mara was throwing at Buddha, could we think of those as actually helpful sort of entities that he just didn't have, at that moment, he didn't have the capacity to take in? Or is it more like just, this is a sort of a different state that's,
No, those were not compassionate beings that were coming to him, no, those were from a Buddhist perspective, those are the illusions of his mind, right? That he was, and his thing was to, to stay steady in connection with the power of the earth, in connection with the power of non-duality, of the vision of the clear light, no matter what was coming at him, he was going to hold on to that, right? But in shamanism, you're working, there's a way to work with the shamanic journey in particular, where you are connecting only with compassionate beings at the beginning of the practice. So compassionate beings being a key.
I remember reading a biography of, I don't remember of whom, but he was saying during a meditation, whatever kind of retreat, that he kept being tempted by these lustful visions of beautiful women tempting him, and that he came to, like, at a certain point, he sort of broke through it and realized that it was these like Tara-like deities that were sort of trying to reach him, but that his frame of
Oh,
reference
that's so interesting.
was so limited and screwed up that he could only see them within that frame of
That
reference
context.
rather than seeing them in their wholeness. It always fascinated me that, or that you were talking about these people who are having visions that they can't quite integrate or understand, and so they have to sort of run away from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, there's so much to learn about the nature of the self and the nature of the world, right? And we will continue next time. Let's go ahead and close circle. The sun is a circle.
The sun is a circle.
The moon is a circle.
The moon is a circle.
The earth is a circle.
The earth is a circle.
The drum is a circle.
The drum is a circle.
We are a circle within a circle.
We are a circle within a circle.
Thank you, everyone. May all beings be free.
Just a few announcements. I may volunteer here, and I just want to remind people that this beautiful center exists because of you and us. And so if you can donate and give Donna to our beautiful teachers, that would be greatly appreciated. We have lots of ways to collect your donations. And then also please check the calendar. We have a couple, I think Sunday we have an event with a teacher who only teaches online. Accurate? Andrea Vecchione, the Dharma of Intimacy. I believe it's from 10 to 12, but I'm not sure. So check the calendar. 12 to 1. Anyway, at any rate, that's happening on Sunday. And then on Monday, we have, I think, two teachers, Augusta, thank you. She's not this Monday? Check the calendar, there's cool stuff coming up. That's the point, the calendar is the way, and Donna is like the path from your heart out to the street.
Lisa's back. When? What's in
Soon.
Soon. Check your calendars. But really, the best way to know what's what is to sign up for the newsletter on the website, and then Noam constructs a.
May 1st, I think.
May 1st. Noam gives us a weekly, very tidy, organized email every week, once a week. So you just know your whole scene, and there's some upcoming events, so you can plan ahead, and it's very efficient. So thank you all for being here. We're really grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.